Testing, testing. Are you with me? Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk about one of the best players to ever play for Plymouth Argyle, certainly in my lifetime, was Paul Mariner. Paul, as everybody knows, he went to Ipswich Town. What happened was that a number of clubs were watching him. He was playing so well for us. A number of clubs were watching him, particularly West Ham. Ron Greenwood, who eventually became the England football manager, he was at one particular time he was like the general manager at West Ham, and he came down to Home Park 3 times to watch him, and he watched him 3 times away at away games as well. And West Ham offered 200,000 for him, which our board were prepared to accept. They didn't want him to go, obviously, but the club was at that time the finance wasn't all that good, and we didn't want to stand in his way of progressing his career. And at the 3rd time that Ron Greenwood came down, he said that his board had agreed on the figure with us, and he wanted the transfer to go through, if possible, after the match. So Robert Daniel, the chairman, asked me to get the transfer forms ready and so forth, and I did do so, and took Ron Greenwood up to my office, and I could distinctly remember he said, we better get the football combination transfer form as well, because if he's injured or he's dropped, he would obviously want to play in that league. So I said to Peter Hall, and he would confirm it, that he'd been here tonight, I said, Peter, get that combination form, we get that form as well. So all the forms were signed. He shook hands with me, and he said, I live in Brighton, I'm going to drive home to Brighton now, a very happy man. He said, I think we've got a really top-class player. He's going to do very well for West Ham, and I predict that he will play for England in the future. So we shook hands, and off he went. I said to Peter, he's pushing it a bit, England, isn't he? But at that time. But of course, he went on and played 37 times, I think, for England after. But anyway, on the Monday morning, Tony Waiters rang me from his office and said, can you come down, it's fairly important. I said, yes, okay. So I'll go down to his office. I walk in and he says, Mariner's going to Ipswich. I said, no, he's not. He's gone to West Ham. I signed the transfer forms and it's all agreed. He said, that was on Saturday. He said, things have happened over the weekend and he's going to Ipswich. So I thought, well, that's a bit much. Everything's all been done, you know. So anyway, to cut a long story short, there was lots of telephone calls and so forth. It was all arranged that on the Monday, I would go up with Robert Daniel, the chairman, Tony Waiters, and Paul Mariner. We go to London, but it then transpired that West Bromwich Albion had also put in a bid, and they were after him. So he said to me, Tony said to me, Johnny Giles, the manager, will be there with their secretary, Alan Everest, and the chairman, Mr. Millichip. They're all going to be at the Great Western Hotel, and they want to interview Paul Mariner to try and sign him. But of course they're not going to sign him because he's going to Ipswich. So he said to Paul Mariner, you get a taxi and go to the FA headquarters at Lancaster Gate, and Graham, you go and see Johnny Giles and tell him that they must go to the FA headquarters and interview him there. He said they're wasting their time, but that's what you better tell them. So I go over to Johnny Giles and Alan Everest and say, I know you're expecting to see Mariner here, but he's not here. He's at the FA headquarters at Lancaster Gate. You'll have to go there. So they said, well, yeah, you come with us then. So I went with them in a taxi to the FA headquarters, and they all went in one room and I went in another, and less than 10 minutes they came out, and Alan Everest said to me, "That's a waste of bloody time. We've come all the way from Birmingham and he's already signing for another club." So I apologised and off they went disgustedly. So I then got on the phone, used an FA phone, and phoned the Great Western Hotel at Paddington, spoke to Tony Waiters and said, "Look, they've gone off in a huff." He said, "Well, hard lines, you know." I said, "Well, should we come back now?" He said, "No." He said, "All the press and TV, they're all here." He said, "You better take him to a cafe or something, go and have a cup of tea and come back in half an hour to an hour." So that's what we did. And then it wasn't too far away, we walked back. And when we got back, all the press and the TV gone, and the only ones that were there were Bobby Robson and the secretary of Ipswich. Then Tony Waiter sprung on me. I didn't know this, but Tony said to me, "Those two fellas over there are two Ipswich players. We're having them as part of the transfer fee." I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." He said, "Yes. Now, the best thing, you better go to the FA, back to the FA, and get them registered to play for us. And the secretary of Ipswich, who is here, he'll go with you." He said, "We're going off on the 4:30 train back to Plymouth. You better get the 5:30 back." So I then had to get a taxi and go with the two players who I didn't know were going to sign for us, but did sign for us, take them to the headquarters. One was called Austin, the other was called Padelty. And I did all the registrations and that, but by the time we got back, we just missed the 5:30 train. We come back on the 6:30. I also phoned Peter Hall and said, "Book a double twin-bedded room at the Holiday Inn, so for them when we come back." And of course he was astonished. He said, "Who's this for?" I said, "Well, we got two Ipswich players coming as well." So we called the 6:30 train back, which got in about 12 o'clock. I then drove them up to the Holiday Inn and left them there, and then I picked them up the next morning and took them into Home Park. But so we went to, so following on from that, the following day, I get a telephone call from Reg Pratt, who was the chairman of West Ham, and he said, "I don't know your chairman's telephone number, but you can pass a message on from me. You can tell him that we are disgusted, West Ham. We will never ever do business with Plymouth Argyle again, and we are reporting your club to the football, to the FA and the Football League." So I said, "Oh, okay." So I then rang the chairman and told him what had happened. So I said, "He's reporting us to the FA and the Football League." He said, "I don't bloody well blame him after that." So he was disgusted. So that didn't give us a very good name with West Ham. So that was the Paul Mariner thing. And strangely enough, he came back to Argyle, was it 2 seasons ago? He came back.
Yes.
And I told him about the West Ham business, and he said, "I didn't know anything about that at all." He said, "All I was told on the Sunday that Tony Waiters had spoken to Bobby Robson and it was all agreed." So it was a bit of bad business, but it was the manager's fault, really. It was nobody else's fault by him. The other thing was, I said this at the last meeting we had here on the 31st of May, that when I was secretary of the P&D League, I used to be in the independent offices Saturday nights, and I used to get the telephone calls from all the clubs ringing through their results and their goal scorers and that, and I used to write a page for the Independent for the Sunday. And whilst I was there, the sports editor, Arthur Schofield, said to me, "We're looking for someone to report the Argyle reserve games, the football combination games. Would you like to do it?" And I was quite astonished, but I said, "Oh yes, thank you very much." He said, "We'll give you a bit of training." He said, what you do is 500. What we have is 500 words on the match, and that, you know, and we'll explain to you the procedure. So what I did then, I used to go to do Argyle reserves every match, sit up in the press box with Graham Hamley or whoever was doing the reserves for the Herald, and did all the matches. And back then, for those of you who don't know, it was a really strong league, that combination. We had Arsenal reserves, Chelsea, Tottenham, West Ham, all the big London clubs, even as far as Ipswich and Norwich. And we used to get big crowds on. Sometimes we got 8,000-10,000 to watch Arsenal reserves. It was absolutely marvellous. So I used to do these matches, and one day it was turned out to be Ipswich Town. And when I got down there, walked in, who should come in behind me was the chairman of Ipswich. He was called John Cobbold, and he was well known in the football world. His name was always in the paper. Frightfully posh he was. Not only that, he was my platoon officer in the Welsh Guards in Palestine. So I thought, good God. So he wouldn't remember me from then, but I approached him and said, what are you doing here? I said, you're the chairman of the club. I said, Ipswich are open to Birmingham or something today. What are you doing here? He said, oh, this old Ramsey, he said, he's bloody strict. He said, he talked us into it. He said, but we've all got to take our turn, the directors. We've got to go to reserve matches away. So I'm the unlucky buckaroo's here today. So he said, what are you doing tonight? He said, we're staying at the Duke of Cornwall. He said, I want you to come to the Duke of Cornwall. So I said, well, no, I'm at the independent office. I worked there all the evening. He said, what time do you finish? I said, 10 o'clock. He said, I'll send a taxi there at 10 o'clock and pick you up. So, of course, I finished. The taxi drives at 10 o'clock, takes me down to the Duke of Cornwall. He's there in the lounge with all the Ipswich players, and he used to swear something terrible. And the players used to say, shh, Mr. John, shh, stop here. And he said, well, this chap here, he was out in Palestine with me. He said, he's now here reporting the match this afternoon, you know. And he said, I'll introduce all the players to you. And he called all the players who sat there. This is so and so. What's your bloody name again? So and so. So I shook hands with all the players. So he said to me, where can we go now? So I said, oh, where do you want to go? So, yeah, well, where is there somewhere to go? So I remember that what I called the Gaumont Cinema down in the Union Street, the big cinema. I don't know what it is now. It's turned into a nightclub. But it was a new dance hall then. I forget it was called. I said, well, there's a new dance hall opened on just down the road from here, see? So we said, right, we'll all go there, right? Everybody outside. So I got 12 players and the trainer and all that. We're all out there. And he marches us down, thank heavens, I directed them down Bath Street, down the side street, left, right. He was doing as always in the army, marching us down. When we get down to go in there, he said, right, he goes up to the counter and he said, right, there's 17 of us. Is it 17? Yes, 17 of us to go into this dance hall. So in we go. When we get in there, there's 2 Argyle players were there, John Leaper, the goalkeeper, and Stuart Brace was the other one. 2 of them, they were there. So for something to do, I took them over and introduced them to Mr. Cobble. And he says, have you been to Ipswich? And John said, yes. He said, well, what do you think of it? He said, the pitch is wonderful. He said, but if you don't mind me saying so, I didn't go much on the dressing rooms. What's the matter with the dressing rooms? He said, well, they're not very good for a first division club, you see. So he said, don't you think so? So he said, I've never been in the bloody dressing rooms. He said, Ramsey don't allow directors in there. So we had a bit of a laugh about that. But then, another on a more serious occasion, the Jimmy Greaves the famous Chelsea player. He played for several clubs. He'd gone to Italy, and he'd only stayed there a few months. Got unsettled there. He played 12 games and scored 9 goals. But Spurs had signed him, and the Spurs, for some reason, they didn't have a game on the Saturday, so it was all in the press. Graham Hamley, Harley Lower, they all had it, that Jimmy Greaves was playing for Spurs reserves, and he was terrific, big transfer fee, but he was going to play for the reserves, so it was all in the national press had it all. It turns out that the pressmen, all the top press writers came down because he was such a big star, Jimmy, and the press box was chock-a-block, and outside the press box with all these big names, all these top writers from Fleet Street were there, and normally there was just Graham Hamley and me, him for the Herald and me for the Independent. So it turned out that they said that there was a press conference, press thing meeting in the visitors' dressing room at 5:30 after the match. As soon as the match finished, I don't know how many telephones there were in the press box. Harley would tell you, but they grabbed all the phones because there wasn't any mobiles then. We didn't have such thing as that. They grabbed all the phones, so I couldn't get the phone to phone my report through, and I had to get my report through by a certain time. Anyway, Graham couldn't use the phone, and I couldn't because they were collaring the phone. So they all get their reports through to their places, and then they all pushed off for the press conference in the visitors' dressing room. Then by the time I'm doing my report, it's ages, and then I have to phone it through to Ivy Bridge where the Independent was printed. So the time I get this, I go downstairs to go into the green room, and there are all the Argyle players and all the pressmen, they're all there, and I thought, good God, I've missed the press conference. And somebody said to me, "You're too late, mate, you've missed it." So I thought, I'm going to be in trouble with the sports editor about this. I haven't got any quotes or anything. So for some reason, and I can't imagine why I did it, but I walked out and strolled down by the visitors' dressing room and just pushed the door open, and I could hear water running. And I looked across, and there's Jimmy Greaves, all on his own, having a shower. And he says, "Hello, mate, what's the matter?" So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm just a humble part-time reporter," I said, "for the local paper, and I've missed the press conference." He said, "You're in a mess now then." He laughed. He said, "That's all right, come on." Came out of the shower, put a towel around himself. He said, "Come over and sit down with me." And I sat down, and I must have sat down there for 20 minutes with him, and he was the most smashing chap I'd ever met in my life in the football world. He was really, I mean, I wasn't even a reporter. I was rubbish into my eyes. I wasn't even a reporter. So he was great to me, and he said to me, "These bloody reporters get on my nerves." He said, "The chap from the People," he said to me, "I suppose you've rushed to the phone as soon as you come off the pitch to tell Irene you scored a fantastic goal." You see, and I said to him, "I don't know where Irene is. Spurs are looking after her. She's in a hotel, but I don't even know what hotel she's in." He said to me, "You buy the Sunday People tomorrow and see what it says." In the People, I assure you now, it said, Jimmy rushed to the phone to speak to his lovely wife Irene to tell her that he scored a wonderful goal. And this was in the Sunday. I didn't think things like that happened. I thought that's a lie. That was the Sunday People that time. And I can tell you, I remember the reporter was called Smith. Very common name.
Oh, yes.
Morris Smith, it might have been Morris. He was called Smith anyway. But after that, the two of us went back into the green room. we didn't call it, there was a tea room, we called it a tea room then. Went into the tea room, all the Argyle lads were there, and all the pressmen were there. He ignored the pressmen and he went straight over to the Argyle lads and was chatting amongst them. And that stuck out in my memory. I thought, he's the best player in the whole of United Kingdom. He's a fantastic player. Everybody loved Jimmy Greaves. And he ignored the press and he went over to the Argyle lads, and I thought, what a wonderful thing that was. He could say, who are these? Argyle reserves, who are they? But no, he was chatting with them and laughing and joking, and I thought what a smashing thing it was, and that stuck in my memory. And I felt very sad when I read the other day, some while back now, that he'd had a stroke, and he couldn't go to the ground and see any matches or anything. But his record was, he scored 357 goals in 536 games. That's a fantastic record, that. And in England, he played 57 games for England and scored 44 goals. That's a fantastic. So that stuck in my memory, and it always will. I thought, what a wonderful chap he was. I mean, I was nobody, wasn't I? I wasn't even a press man, really. I thought that was terrific. Jimmy Greaves. The other one, Alf Ramsey, was great, really. I mean, he was in the army. I saw him play one game. He was out in Palestine, Alf Ramsey. I was talking about Stafford Williams and the London Theatre, which reminded me, talking about Jimmy Tarbuck. And I know this may sound strange. I mean, Mr. Starnes might be surprised to hear this, but this was honestly true. The first couple of years I was at Argyle, we travelled everywhere by train. There was no motorways then. Most people travelled by train. So every time we went to London, on a Friday night, we used to take the players out to a show. We used to go and see a show. And I remember one show we went at, I think that was at the London Palladium, but it was Jimmy Tarbuck. And there was all the players, the directors and me, and the manager all sat there in the stalls, lovely. Jimmy Tarbuck came on and he said, this is a great night. I feel really great tonight because, as you all know, I love football. I'm a football man. Liverpool was his club. But he said, we're honoured. He said, we've got Plymouth Argyle here tonight, the players, and give them a clap. So, you know what he's like, Jimmy Tarbuck. So everybody claps and that, and he shouts out, he said, Snoz, how you getting on with the hayseeds down in Plymouth? And what he meant, Snoz, was the nickname of John Sillett, who was our right back. We got him he became the manager of Coventry when he left football. And he was a real character, John. But he was sat next to me, John Sillett. I said to him, how does he know you? He said, I've known him for years. But John Sillett was the one that everybody loved in the dressing room. He was always good fun. And he was a good player, but that was it. We used to go do a show, and when I think about nowadays how they're so fussy about what they can do and what they can't do, but going to a show was almost unheard of, I should have thought. But some of the other thing that greatly impressed me when I first joined the club was they had a procedure whereby what they call the duty director, whoever it was, we'll say we're playing like Bristol Rovers tomorrow, whoever was the duty director went to the hotel, you find out where the visiting team was. Let's say the team were staying at the Continental Hotel. The duty director and the secretary went down and met them on Friday nights, and you meet the visiting directors and have a drink with them or have a meal with them perhaps, and this was a regular thing. So it turned out that it wouldn't be with Bristol Rovers obviously, but other teams, because that's too close, but teams that came down here and stayed overnight in the hotel, every home match I would go out on a Friday night, and of course you'd meet some famous people, famous managers and players. I can always remember one occasion, Blackpool came down, and the Stanley Mortensen, he was a famous international player. He was the manager, and it was nice meeting him. And the right back was called Jimmy Armfield, and he played for England. And we were in the lounge, and he was sat there. Jimmy Armfield was reading a book, smoking a pipe. And when did you last see a player smoking a pipe? Back then, I suppose it wasn't, a lot of them, but he was a famous player. And I remember saying to Stan Mortensen, "Is he a loner?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "He's coming down in the coach, he's always reading a book," and so forth. But I thought, how different that is. Something I don't expect you get many do that today, but there we are. Another time, getting back to the reserve matches, Arlie will remember this because he actually gave me the copy of the attendance. We played Mansfield Town reserves, and the attendance was 25,000. I've got it here somewhere. The attendance for a reserve game was 25,000. The reason was that they decided to sell the tickets for the Spurs Cup tie at the turnstiles. People were queuing up and going, getting a ticket or 2 tickets, coming out and going back and queuing up again. But that was the crowd, 25,000 for a reserve match, and the team was Mansfield Reserves. That's the biggest crowd. I can remember Jimmy Hill at a dinner mentioning that, said that the crowd was the biggest crowd they've had for a football combination match. Yes. Another time, it was the 8th of November 1978. We had a big game on the Saturday. It was a league game, but I had the summons to be on the jury on the 8th of November, and I went to the jury and attended the court, and we were all lined up to swear on the so forth, and the judge said, "Right, Graham Little," so somebody boomed out, "Objection!" What's that? He said, "Mr. Little, the police have objected to you being a juror, and you will be discharged. Please leave the court." That's good. So as I go out, there's a cluster of police inspectors and that, and they're all laughing, patting me on the back. I said, "What was all that about?" They said, "You got a big match on Saturday." So that's the only time I've ever been near to be a juror. And you get the characters in football, as everybody knows, and one of possibly the one who's disliked a lot is the ex-Chelsea chairman, Ken Bates. And I can remember one day, and he rang me up and he said, "Little, I want you to do me a good turn." You see, not Mr. Little. So I said, "Yes, Mr. Bates, what can I do for you?" So he said, "I want you to book me a meal in a nice hotel about 5 miles from Plymouth." So I said, "When's this?" He said, "Well, the Friday before the match on the Saturday." I said, "Yes, all right." He said, "Book me a taxi at 8 o'clock. So I said, "Yes." 8 o'clock at the Mayflower Post. "I'm not stopping at the Mayflower Post, that's the team. I'm staying at the Holiday Inn." I said, "All right then, the Holiday Inn." 8 o'clock, the Holiday Inn. So he said, "Where's the hotel you're going to book me into?" So I thought, 5 miles from there. The only thing I could think about was the Borringdon out to Plimpton. So I said, "It's called the Borringdon Hotel out to Plimpton." "Yes, all right, the Borringdon Hotel." So that was all done. So the next day, I happened to be out in the tea room. It was quite crowded, and here he comes in, all very blustery. And so I said, "Oh, Mr. Chairman, how was the meal?" So he said, effing awful. Loud with ladies in there and ladies, tea ladies and everything booming out, and just walked right past me into the boardroom. I thought, he's an ignoramus, you know. Anyway, go in at half time, and he comes over, puts his arm around me, and he said, "Thank you very much. That was very nice. It was okay." You know, but that's the way he was, I suppose. I've read lots of things about him, but at another time, we were playing Chelsea again, and the pitch was in a hell of a state, and it was doubtful. It was the Saturday morning, and it was very doubtful. So their manager was called Campbell, and he rang me up and he said, "What's it like? Do I need to come out and look?" And I said, "Yeah, the pitch is pretty bad." And with the same, the door burst open. He must have ignored everybody outside, burst into my office. He said, "Put the phone down a little, I want to speak to you." So I said, I'm talking to your manager here." So he grabbed the phone and he said, "Are we paying for this call?" And he must have said yes, and he put the phone down. So that's the type of person, every time I've seen him on television and that. But he bought Chelsea for £5, wasn't it, Martin? £5, I think he paid for it. And he collected all the debts, so many million debts or something. So he did a wonderful job, and I think he lives in Monaco now. And you know, but that's sometimes the people that you meet. But quite often, you would get like a team coach on a Saturday. The Saturday morning, the coach, visiting coach arrived with the trainer in there, and he comes in with the kit and lays the kit out in the dressing room. And 2 or 3 chairmen would come in with them, and they come straight in my office and have a cup of tea. And I remember there was a Dr. Grossmark at Gillingham, and year after year after year he would come in. And there was another one at Huddersfield, and they all come in, and it was really nice. I really enjoyed meeting some of these people, and that's like, you know, another person that I might mention is he was called Tony Ball, and he was, well, I wouldn't say a big noise, but he was very much involved in the motor business in Plymouth, and he joined the board, and he came into me with a cheque for £5,000 or something, which was a loan to the club, and he had this little boy with him, and the boy sat down, and I got him a drink and so forth. Didn't think much of that, but about a week later, he was elected to the board, and then soon after that, Robert Daniel rang me and said, "You know, Mr. Ball joined the board." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, he's got a fantastic job in Germany, so he'll be going off the board, and he'll be coming into you. He'll coming into you for a cheque for the 5,000, give him back the 5,000." And he came with him, his little boy, and I didn't know until afterwards who that little boy was. It's Michael Ball, the singer, the big singer that is now. You know, it turned out there, and Mr. Ball eventually finished up out in South Africa, and he became a director of Cape Town City, as it happened. So I don't know whether there's much more that I can say. What I would like to add is that on my 90th birthday, my wonderful wife arranged a fantastic party which we had here with Paul. She arranged with Paul Hart. He was aiding her very well, and over 100 people turned up. It absolutely shook me rigid. But what amazed me, and I was so delighted about it, I looked across at the bar when we came in. One was Billy Rafferty, and he came all the way from Carlisle just for my birthday, and I thought, him and his wife, I thought how wonderful that was. I mean, he was highly thought of as a player, everybody liked him, Mariner and Rafferty, and he's to this day, every time I met him, he'd say, why did they sell me? I love Plymouth, I really love Plymouth, I love the crowd and that. And I said, well, I can. He said, and it was a paltry fee, wasn't it? He said it was 20,000, and we had to give him 1,000 out of that for some reason or other. But we got 20,000 for him, and he'd scored more goals than Mariner, and Mariner was 200,000. But Carlisle bought him for 20,000. And within 8 or 9 months, they sold him to Wolves for 105,000. And he said to me, how ridiculous was that? I said, well, Tony Waite did a good job as manager, but I never understood why, you know, he wasn't any trouble to the club. There was no reason other than he just didn't want him. But he went on and played wonderfully well for Wolves. And but that party, and there was Green, who was the captain of Argyle in the promotion season, he came from Torquay. Colin Sullivan came from Southampton. But there was 18 players, wasn't there, dear? 18 players. I thought, but you were on the phone to lots of them, and I didn't know anything about it. It was a completely wonderful, wonderful time that was for me. And before I close, I would just like to wish all the best, Mr. Starn, tomorrow to the team. I hope that things start to turn our way. The darkest hour before the dawn. Let's hope we win tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Graham? He's happy to take any questions. Can I ask a first question?
Yes.
Who was the most difficult manager? Who was the most difficult manager you had to deal with?
Difficult managers? I got on with all of them, really. Tony Waite was a bit difficult at times. He upset the directors a few times, and I think he didn't get on very well with Robert Daniel. But I think by and large, I think they were all good. I like Billy. Billy Bingham was a bit unlucky in a way, although it was his own fault when he went. He was a smashing little fella, really. I got on tremendously well with him, but he had it in his contract that he would also be the Ireland manager, Northern Ireland. And the season that Argyle weren't doing at all well. And it turned out that the Ireland under-21 team were playing Wales at Wrexham on a Wednesday, and he said to the chairman, I should be going there to that match. And the chairman said, no, you can't. He said, you're the Ireland manager, that meaning you're the first team Ireland, not the under-23 team. So he said, you must not go. So he said, I think I shall be going, he said to the chairman. So, we have this match and we lost, which made matters worse. So the director said then, right, if he goes, we'll sack him. They decided they would sack him. So I thought, right, get on the phone. As soon as I got home, I rang him up. I said, look, they're going to sack you, and if you go on Wednesday, they'll sack you. He says, no, they won't. I said, they will. I'm telling you, they will. So I told Ellis Stoddard, who was like the assistant, and he said, we got to stop him. He said, we don't want to lose him. I said, no, nobody wants to lose him. So we tried to persuade him, but he still went. And sure enough, the worst part about it was he went, the pitch was waterlogged, and the match was cancelled. And we had a match on the Wednesday night. I think it was only a friendly first team friendly or something, but he should have been, the directors maintained that he should have been there for that match. Instead of that, he'd gone to Wrexham. The next day, Thursday, there was a board meeting. Straight away, we sacked the manager, and he was sacked. And the match wasn't played, so you know it was ridiculous. Of course, he went on afterwards. He managed Mansfield and one or two other clubs, and then he managed Everton, and he did really well with Everton because they were in the first division. We were in the third division. He did really well there, and then he was the Ireland manager as well, and Ireland did well. So we lost a good manager, really, all over a silly thing, which was very unfortunate, really. But I got on very well with them. I don't think you'll mind me telling you, Johnny Hoare, when he was the manager, I was a smashing player. Everybody loved Johnny Hoare. And when Bobby Moncur was sacked, and it was unanimous, they made Johnny Hoare the manager. And he did so well that we got to as everybody knows, the semi-final of the Cup. We played Watford at Villa Park, and I think we sold 30,000 tickets for that match. It was terrific, and we only got beaten by a single goal, and we put up a terrific performance there. But unfortunately, although we did so well in the league, in the Cup, we struggled in the league, and the following season we didn't do at all well. And John came into the boardroom and he said, "I think I've lost it with the players. They won't play for me." And he was so downhearted. There was nothing although we weren't doing very well, there was nothing in the directors' minds to get rid of him. But he came in and he was so honest, and he said, "I think I've lost it with the players." He said, "They're not playing for me." And he left and he went home to Exeter. And they said, "Well, we can't keep a manager if the players won't play for him," but, you know. So they were almost broken-hearted about it because everybody loved him. They said, "Well, we'll have to sack him." Graham, when you go up to the office after, give it a while, and then give him a ring and tell him to come and see the chairman at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I said, well, he's going to say to me, well, you know, what's the chair? What was going to see the chair? He's seen you today at the board meeting. What's the point in that? What am I going to say to him? I said, well, you make some excuse that the chairman wants to see him about a special matter or something. Of course, I go home, which is just down the road, Seagrave Road from where I live then. I rang him up, and I felt terrible about it because he was smashing, Johnny Hoare was. Everybody liked him and that. But I said to him, look, the chairman wants to see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. He said, whatever for? I've seen him tonight at the meeting, you know. And I said, well, I don't know what it is. It's a special thing he wants to talk to you about, I think. And that was it. He came in 10 o'clock and he was sacked. But, you know, there are not many managers that would go in and tell the board, because he's more or less he's lost the job, really. The players wouldn't play for him, or didn't play for him. And so that was so unfortunate, really. But, you know, I mean, I've had managers say to me when they've got new ones come in, well, what's their favourite player, or the chairman, and this, that, and the other thing, you know. But John was so straight, he was honest. He just went in and said, I'm sorry, they're just not playing for me. Which was very, very, very sad, really.
Any other questions for Graham?
Graham, were you there when Dan McCauley was there?
What a question. No, that's a funny question, really, because when I retired, the board were very, very good. They said to me, Graham, we'll give you 2 director's box tickets for life when you go. They gave me the company car when I left, and they gave me 2 to it. So I thought that was great. That was a good gesture on their part. Mr. Macaulay buys the club or comes into the club. Everything's all right the rest of the season. And then in the close season, there was some sort of supporters organisation about something, and they wanted me to be the patron. Would I be the patron to this? Whatever it was, I can't remember what it was called now. And I said, yes, all right. Have I got to attend any meetings? They said, well, we'll let you know about that. So it went in the Western Morning News. Mr. Cowdrey, where is he? Mr. Cowdrey put it in that I was the patron. And the next day I got a letter signed by the secretary saying, Dear Graham, I've been asked to write to you to tell you that we cannot give you 2 director's box tickets for this season. We thank you for all the service you've given the club. Yours sincerely, and that was that. So I rang him up. Well, I rang him up 3 times. I couldn't get him. He didn't want to speak to me, obviously, the secretary. So I rang Peter Bloom, who was the vice chairman, and said, look, they've already sent me the booklets for the next season for the director's box. And now I've got this letter, and I read the letter out to him. He said, Graham, I know nothing about it. He said, Graham, you could come tomorrow and bring Irene with you, and you could be my guest. By the end of the afternoon, he'd have me off the board. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, we made a big mistake making him the chair, letting him take over the club. He said, he rules the roost. He said, I'll bring it up at the next board meeting, but I don't hold out any hopes. And it turned out that he brought it up at the next board meeting, and he said, queried it. The rest of the directors queried it, and he said, was he well paid when he was the secretary? So they said yes. He said, well, he can afford to buy a ticket. He said, as far as I'm concerned, he's finished. He won't get any director's box tickets. So that was that. So we didn't go then for several years, and then one day I had a call from Peter Jones, who is now a director, and he said, Graham, I don't know you, he said, but I'm speaking to you from London, but we, the board, understand that you were badly treated by the previous chairman, Mr. Macaulay, and we'd like to make it up to you, and we'd like you to come to the last match of the season. We're going to get promotion, we hope, and you bring your wife as a guest. So we went, didn't we, Irish? We went to it's comical really, because we went and we walked into the boardroom, and Mrs. Macaulay threw her arms around me, threw her arms around Irene, and said, where have you been? She didn't have a clue that we were missing what her husband had done. And she said, oh, lovely to see you. And she shouted out to him, Dan, look who's here, Graham. Graham, we haven't seen Graham for years. And he came over and held out his hand and shook hands with me, and I shook hands with him. And then he walked away, and we walked over, and Peter Bloom and the other ex-directors, and they were there, and they said, you turncoat, after all he's done for you, why did you shake hands with him? I said, I couldn't do anything else.
No.
But even at half-time, and you'll remember her, at half-time, she came up, she's a lovely lady, she came over to us and said, it's a real treat to see you here. And so I dare not say, I was going to say, well, you should ask your husband. So answering your question, Mr. I don't think I would have lasted very long with him. I mean, the lady, nice lady, she was, because they used to be secretaries, now they're chief executives. She was the first one, they made her chief executive, Liz Baker. And from what I gather, she was leaving the boardroom in tears and everything. He was quite nasty to her and so forth. And now she didn't last, I think she lasted one season, was it? One season. She was in tears most of the time. But it's sad really, because, it's so unfortunate, but I forget how many. I think he had about 5 secretaries or chief executives, well, 5 in about 8 years, I think. Kept on sacking them one after another. So I think I would have been, I'd get the DCM, don't come Monday.
Any other questions for Graham, please?
I've got a question. You were talking about Graham, you were talking about former Argyle managers that you've worked with. I think you've got a little story about Trevor Francis.
Oh, I'm glad you yes.
Not that it's management.
Yeah. So I was the manager. Yes, it's on, I forget which one it was. We were looking around for a new manager. Oh, here we go again. We were looking for a new manager, and I said to Peter Bloom, have you ever thought about Trevor Francis, you see? So he said, Trevor Francis, yes. He said, what is he doing now? I said, well, he's coming to the end of his career. He's playing for Queen's Park Rangers. I said, but he must be coming to the end of his career. So he said, you know him? I said, yeah. I said, he calls me Uncle Graham. I said, I'm great friends with his father. So he said, well, have a word with him then. So I rang him up, and a nice foreign-sounding lady, I think she was Filipino, said, Mr. Francis, he has gone out for his wife with a meal with the gentleman next door. So I said, well, would you tell him that Uncle Graham phoned, and could he ring me back? So of course he rang me back and said, hello Uncle Graham, what do you want? You know, so I said, would you like to be the Argyle manager? See, so he said, yeah, I'd love that. He said, why? Is there a chance of it? So I said, well, my chairman told me to give you a ring about it, you see. So he said, I said, what's the position? He said, well, I'm playing for Queen's Park Rangers, but my career's just about finished. But I've got an arrangement with him whereby if a club comes in for me as a manager, I can go. And that was, they called him Bald Eagle Smith, he was called the manager. And so he said, I'll have a word with him tomorrow and then I'll ring you back. So I said, yes, all right. So he saw him and he said, yes, you speak to the chairman and he thinks that's all right. They'll release him to be the manager. So I said, oh, that's good. So I'll ring Peter Bloom, so everybody's excited. Good, we're going to get Trevor for the manager. And then the next day, this chairman of Queen's Park Rangers rings me up. He's effing and blinding at me on the phone, and he said, what are you doing approaching my best player to be your manager? He says, why don't you do things a proper way? So I said, well, I'm sorry about that. I said, he happened to be a friend of mine, that's all. See, so he said, well, I said, I understand that he has got a verbal agreement with your manager that if a chance of becoming manager of the club, you will release him. He said he might have got an agreement with him, but I'm the chairman and he's got no agreement with me, so he's not effing well going to join your club. And he dropped the phone on me. So that's the end of that. So Trevor phoned up and told me that the chairman had refused it. So that was the end of that, unfortunately. But he might have become the manager of Argyle, because he did an exceptionally good job where he went as a manager. He's manager at Crystal Palace, Sheffield Wednesday, and several big clubs. But he was amazing because when he was a young lad, 16, he was one of the best of local players there ever was, I suppose. He was a terrific young player, and he went to play for Plymouth Schools at Coventry. The match was at Coventry. I think they were playing Coventry Schools, and the result was 5-2, and he scored 3 goals and made the other 2 in this match. And at that match was the chief scout of Birmingham, and he approached Trevor's parents and that after the match, and he went to Birmingham, And Argyle tried to sign him. Ellis Stoddard had tried loads of times to try and sign him and couldn't sign him. So we went to Birmingham, and we were a good team in the first division then. And he got in the first team, I don't know whether he was 16 or 17. He got in Birmingham's first team, and he was getting fan mail. The fans used to chant Superboy, Superboy when he was on the field. Isn't it terrific? So he was playing in the top division at 16 or 17. I think it might have been 16. And he was getting, I was told by the Birmingham secretary, he was getting over 1,000 fan letters a week. And he had somebody special in the club was just dealing with his mail. And of course he went to, Brian Clough signed him for Nottingham Forest, where he became the first £1 million player. So there, he did, that was, it never was. He never came.
Any other questions for Graham? Can I just ask one final question? Can you tell us the strange coincidence that appointed Tony Waiters?
Sorry?
The strange coincidence.
Oh,
that
yes.
led to Tony
Yes,
Waiters.
Thanks for reminding me. There's been some strange ones of manners. Yes. On another occasion, we were looking for a manager. And a knock came to my door one day, and it was Les Latcham, a player that we'd signed from Burnley. Quiet, nice, ever such a nice lad. And he said, "Mr. Little, can I have a word with you?" And I thought, oh, he got a tax problem or something. And he said, "As you know, I come from Lancashire. I've got lots of friends and relatives there," he said. "And the one that everyone is talking about, and it's in the press all the time, is about a chap called Tony Waiters. He was a Liverpool goalkeeper. He's played for England, and they reckon he's coaching. He's terrific as a coach of youngsters and that." He said, "I thought I'd just tell you that possibly we might be interested in him." So I said, "Thank you." So I thought, right, ring the chairman, keep him. So I said, rang Robert Daniel. I said, told him what he said. So he said, "Well, see if you make some more inquiries and yourself," and that. So which I did. And then on the Friday morning, the phone rang, and Lorna says to me, "It's the Chelsea secretary for you." So he said, "Oh, Graham," he said, "Can I have, can you have 2 director's box tickets tomorrow for our scout? Wants to watch the match." So I said, "Yeah, what's his name?" He said, "Tony Waiters." So that's a coincidence. So I rang the chairman. I said, "You know that fella we were talking about, Tony Waiters, he's coming tomorrow as a scout for Chelsea." He said, "Right, when he comes," he said, "you have a chat with him before," he said, "before the match," he said, "and I'll tell the directors." So when he comes, I have a chat with him. I said, "You watching one of our players?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, "Who's that then?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you." I said, "No, that's all right." So he said, I said, he had another man with him. He said, I stayed the night at my brother's at Brixham. So he said, "I should be going back there tonight." I said, "Oh yeah, very nice, you know." I said, "Have you been down this way before?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "When I packed up playing," he said, I didn't have nothing to do. He said, I was a lifeguard at Teignmouth." I said, "Teignmouth?" And nobody drowns at Teignmouth. So we had a laugh and a joke with him, and then, so I told the chairman, so he said after the match, he said, I'll ask the directors, ask the club doctors to go and get the visiting directors when they go," he said, "and we'll get him in for a chat." I said, "Yeah, okay then." So he said, "Tell him to hang on." So I said, "Yeah." So I said, before the second half started, I said to him, "Look, my chairman wants a yarn with you after the match. Is that all right?" He said, "What's he want me for?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "But he said he wants to chat with you." He said, "Okay." So of course, a long story short again, I'll go around Mulberry Bush, and they cleared the boardroom with the doctors, went in there, and they said, "We're going to have a meeting here." So I go out and fetch him and take him in. So I thought, well, I've got to get up the office after the match to see about the gate receipts and everything. So I push off, and the next morning I get a call to say that 2 directors had gone to Brixham. The meeting had apparently decided to offer him the manager's job, and they talked about it in the boardroom, and the 2 directors, Brian Williams and Peter Skinnard, had gone to Brixham to have another chat with him and talk terms and everything, about wages and everything, I suppose. And he was going to be the manager. So strange things happen in football. If he hadn't been coming down that day for Chelsea, he might never have become the manager. That's strange. And another case of manager, this is even stranger, really. Again, we were looking for a manager. Don't forget, I was there 26 years. I can't remember the exact dates, but we were looking for a manager. And the manager of Southampton, what was he called? McMenemy, is it? Yeah. He rang me up. I knew him quite well, and he said, "You're looking for a manager?" He said, "I've got just a chap for you." I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Jackie Charlton." I said, "Really? He's a big name. Yeah, lovely. Why, what makes you think he'd be interested?" He said, "I'm sure he'd be interested." He said, "I'll get hold of him and get him to get in touch with you." I said, "Okay." So time went on, he didn't get in touch with me, and then he rang back and said, "I've been trying all over the place." He said he's on safari out in Kenya. He said, "and I'm trying to get hold of him out there and can't." I said, "Oh, all right." So we have a board meeting, and I'll report this to the board. And they were chatting there. So the vice chairman, Peter Skinnard, said, "Look, Johnny Newman used to be our captain, wonderful captain. He's doing well as Exeter's manager. Why don't we go for him?" "Yes, okay, right." "Graham, you got his number?" "Yeah, she's got his telephone number." Right. "Ring him up." And so burr, 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 burr. He's out. No answer. So we got to do something. They're all getting desperate, right? There's a match going on upstairs. We're down in the board meeting. There's a reserve match going on. So they said, "Where's the chairman says, where's Ellis Stoddard?" I said, "He's up watching the match, you see." So he said, "Well, go and get him to come down. Perhaps he'll give us some idea of who to go for." All right, see. So we're going, "I'll get Ellis, they want you down in the board meeting for." He said, "What for?" I said, "I don't know what for. They want you to go down." So he goes down. So I go up the office then. So I go up the office and about, I don't know, up there for half an hour or so, half time, and we'll say. So I'm walking down towards the boardroom again, and he's walking up to me with a big smile on his face. So I said, Did you advise him about the manager then?" He said, "Yes, I did." So I said, "Who did you recommend?" And he said, "Me." I said, "They have made you the manager?" He said, "I'm the manager." And they made him the manager. Because he had been manager before, and Argyle finished 4th in the league, the highest in the 2nd division, which was very good when he was the manager, when Blindle was the chairman. And we finished 4th in the table. He was a bloody good manager. Excuse my language. But yeah, he got in there they want him to advise them on who to go for as the manager. He talked himself into the job. You ever heard one like that before, Mr. Starnes?
You give me ideas though, Grant.
Stranger things happen. It's amazing what happens in football. And one more thing.
Eric Morecambe.
Who?
Eric Morecambe.
Who?
Eric Morecambe. Eric Morecambe.
Yeah, Morecambe, yeah. No, what was I talking about then? Elton John. I forgot Elton John. Yeah, Elton John rang me one day. We were playing Watford. He says, "Can I land my bloody helicopter on your pitch if I come down in the morning?" This was on a Friday. I said, "I don't know. I'll have to inquire about that." So I thought, I better ring the police. So I rang the police, and they said, no, of course not. They gave me the reasons why. So I rang back, and I couldn't get him. I got his manager. He was called Mr. Reed. What a memory. He was called Mr. Reed. And he said, I said, "Look, the police say no. I said, well, I've got an idea. I said, we've got the people that own the St. Melian golf course are called Bond, the Bond brothers. And I said, they're mad keen Argyle fans. I said, I reckon if they agree, he could land a helicopter on your golf course and you could bring him in. Said, lovely job, that, yeah, you're lovely. So I ring the Bond brothers, yeah, they're over the moon about it. That's lovely. Elton John, yeah, lovely. So that's smashing, that's all arranged. So I thought, I'll better ring Graham Hamley and you get it in the Herald tonight. So I rang Graham Hamley, it's all in the Herald. Elton John, come into the match, you know. And so that was that. So the Saturday morning, the phone rings. Mr. Reid again, he says he's got the flu, he said, but he's just got the sniffles. He said he's not coming. So after all that, he didn't turn up. So that was one thing with Elton John. The other thing was, we were playing Watford at Watford. We were playing Watford at Watford, and Michael Firth was the head of the Labour Party then. He was a big noise then at the Labour Party, and of course he would go to the match. But Elton John knew this, so he'd written to him and invited him to come there at early, like 12 o'clock or whatever, and be his guest at lunch at the club. So we get up there, and Eddie Plumley, the secretary, he's in a state. He said, Elton's up the pole. I said, why, what's the matter? He said, well, it's nearly 2 o'clock, he said, and Michael Firth was his guest and should be here for lunch at 12 o'clock, and he hadn't turned up. So Elton John came out then, and he said, is he here? Have anybody seen him? So he said, no. So he said, do you know him? I said, yes. Well, I know him, yes. So he said, well, can you go around and see if you can find him anywhere? Perhaps he's around here somewhere. So I go out, and this is amazing. And I went up, there's long queues for buying tickets. And who's in the queue? Michael Firth. So I go up to him, I say, excuse me. I said, I'm Graham Little, I'm the secretary of Plymouth. I go, oh, pleased to meet you. I said, what are you doing here? He said, well, I'm going to buy tickets for the match. I said, but you've got an invitation to lunch at 12 o'clock with Elton John. He's the president or chairman of Watford, you see. So he said, yes. He said, I don't like any fuss. So I said, well, I think you ought to come. I said, you ought to. He said, no, I'll buy tickets in the stand. I said, no, I think you must come with me, please, you know. So he came down with me. Elton John wouldn't speak to him then. He didn't speak to him at the match, but he sat with us in the director's box at the match. But that was most strange. But that was two things with Elton John. And when he comes down here, I think Elton John's appeared here in the big show and everything. And everybody's in. I thought, you know, Elton John, I've had dealings with him. I know on one occasion when we played Watford, we were in the boardroom after the match and looking at the results coming through on TV, and he came in. He had a Trilby hat on. He came in and put it on top of the TV, and he was there chatting with somebody, and then he put the hat on and out he'd go. 5 minutes later he'd come back, take his hat on. And I said to Eddie Plumley, the secretary, what's he keep on putting his hat on? He said, he's embarrassed, he said, because he's going bald and he don't want anybody to see. So that's why he kept his hat on all the time when he went out, you see. They were all going, everybody was leaving, and I thought, I'll get his autograph. So I said, excuse me, I wonder if you signed my programme for my son. So he said, what's he called? I said, Alan. He said, I distinctly remember, he said, 2 L's or 1? I said, 1. So he wrote best wishes, Alan, and signed it. He was ever so nice, he was a nice chap. But I thought, Michael Firth, I thought, well, how silly that was, really. You know, from strange rather than silly, wasn't it?
Any other questions for Graham?
Eric Morecambe.
Morecambe.
Eric
Oh,
Morecambe
Morecambe.
finished on last
Yeah,
one.
we've had our share of comedians and that, so both there. Eric Morecambe was, because his name was Bartholomew, that was his real name, and he was the director of Luton Town. And we were playing Bristol Rovers, as we are tomorrow. We were playing Bristol Rovers, and we went up in the coach on the morning of the match, and we go into this hotel for a pre-match lunch. We had a player called Keith Allen who played for Luton. And we're having the meal, and Eric Morecambe walks in and goes over and kisses Keith Allen. And he had everyone in absolute stitches. If anybody, you must have seen him on television and that, he's absolute scream. And he had everybody in fits of laughter. So we go to the match, and right behind, I know that Harley, you were there, you probably were. Right behind the press box was right behind the director's box, and we were watching the match, and we were hearing lots of laughter. And so, what's everybody laughing at? You look around, and all the men in the press box are in there fits of laughing, and there's nothing to laugh at. Football matches going on, and then we kept sight. Eric Morecambe was there. Apparently, he was, I don't know for what reason, he was doing the match for the News of the World in a comical way, I suppose. But he had them in the stand. And on another occasion, we had Johnny Hoare had a testimonial, and they had a huge crowd. We had Tony Waiters was responsible for it. We got Liverpool had won the league and the cup and everything, and they came down at the end of the season and played the testimonial for Johnny Hoare. And afterwards, we had a reception in the Embassy 2 club at Stoke. Jimmy Hilson was the manager, and we had all players there. We had tankards that John was presented to each player, and I was calling them out, Clements and Keegan and all these players who were playing, calling them out, and they were getting there. And when they all finished, and I was sort of doing the comparing, and I said, thank you very much. I said, and now I'd ask our manager to say a few words. Tony Waiters came down from the back, picked up the microphone and said, a few words. And then they said I stood there with a mouth. Another stupid thing really, but it was funny. And he said a few words. But the manager of that club was he was a friend of mine. He was a good footballer locally called Jimmy Hilson. And on a number of occasions, we had like big stars appearing at the club. And he said, if you want them out to Argyle for an evening at the Vice President's Club, he said, I'll get them to go there. So we had Frank Carson, the comedian. He came down there because I'd met him several times before. And Frank was on £1,000 a week, which was a hell of a lot of money in those days. And with Jimmy, instead of staying in a hotel, he'd stay with Jimmy, who lived at St. Jude's. But very down to earth. And so we were there at the Johnny Hoare thing, and he says, when he comes on and he said, you'll have to bear with me, I'll tell these jokes very slowly. The reason is that Graham Little likes to wipe them down on his face. And when he finished, he said, Frank Carson, News at Town, Home Park. Eric Morecambe.
Good, I think. Can we get to the next?